Welcome to another episode of Life Matters, where we discuss the matters of life because we believe that your life matters. Here to my left, I have Pastor John and Dale, and I'm Pastor Devon, your host or facilitator per se. So glad that you joined us for another episode of Life Matters. So I'm just going to turn it over to the guys. What are we talking about today?
All right, so today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about barriers to the gospel, or more importantly, breaking down those barriers.
Okay.
So this past Sunday, we spent some time talking about the story of the Good Samaritan. And one of the things that I kind of brought out in this message was that the Samaritan, we kind of use it as just this colloquial phrase, this like, be a good Samaritan. And we just kind of take that to be like, be a good person, be somebody who will help somebody. And yet, like, there was this deep division in that time between the people of Israel and the Samaritans. And I won't go into all the history, but there was just kind of this divide between their histories. They didn't like each other at the time. And it wasn't just one-sided. It was both sides. They didn't like each other. And yet, Jesus tells a story of what is it to be a neighbor. And he uses this example of, like, there might be somebody who is completely different from you, like by your groups that you're associated with, completely separated by you. And yet, what he calls us to is this gospel, this good news that brings people together, that breaks down barriers, that breaks down worldly divisions. And for us as a church, it's such an important part of who we are. And something that a lot of people kind of come in when they visit and they kind of check out things, and they'll say, man, like, there's just like all different types of people. And I think there's something beautiful about saying, okay, the way I always describe it, we're a bunch of people with nothing in common except Jesus.
Which is a cliche if you don't break that down.
Right. And I think that's what we can really do today is, one, like, what do we actually mean by that? Because obviously we have some things in common,
right.
Like we all have hands, or whatever, like so there's not like there's nothing in common. And not to say if somebody didn't have hands, they don't have something in common.
A ligament.
Right. Just kind of using the generic concept. But so one, what do we mean that we have nothing in common? And two, like, why is that such an important value for us as a church? And so I think there's something beautiful in there for us to discuss, to explain a little bit of why we do what we do, the theology behind it, and the beauty that I believe that it creates. I don't want to say uniquely, because it shouldn't be just Life Church at Ardsley Park, but I do think there is something special that God is doing that we at least get to observe and be a part of and get to invest into.
Okay, that's good. So I do want to ask Dale something here. When he mentioned the Good Samaritan, the story of it, like, when you think about breaking down those barriers, what in the sermon or what in the passage in the text here kind of was drawn out, or something that jumps out to you when you think about, okay, who is my neighbor? What does that look like?
Yeah. No, I actually love this story because, quite honestly, like, even just into the read, we're so bent on Good Samaritan and the words there that sometimes we don't recognize, like, in the text, it actually, Jesus never says the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
He literally just says the Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
But we recognize what he has done as something that is good. And I think that's the important part is not Jesus said he was a good Samaritan. It's that we recognize that what he did is what we should be doing for people. So we recognize it as a good thing. And so, like, that's one of the things that's really stuck with me throughout the years. Like, for as long as I've been alive, we've always referred to this as the Good Samaritan, probably many
I'm sure.
years. But Jesus never says he's the Good Samaritan. He just says, hey, look, this is what the Samaritan did. And we automatically, we're like, that's what we should be doing. That is what a neighbor does. That is what somebody who just loves people or just cares about somebody that they see that's in trouble enough. Like, I'm just going to stop and help them. I want to see them better.
I think that's a neat point because, I use that phrase, Good Samaritan, and yet Jesus says, like, nobody good but God. And so it's the sense of, okay, what has God put inside of us, and what does it look like to be a follower of God, to reflect his beauty, to reflect his goodness. And so as Jesus is saying this, like as we kind of describe what is good, it should be a reflection of God's love. I kind of talked about this in the sermon a little bit, of this story, which I guess we just keep just describing the story. If anybody's kind of tuning in and you're like, I haven't heard the story of the Good Samaritan, like, it's basically this guy is traveling between Jerusalem and Jericho. It's about a 16-mile journey. He gets beat up, he gets mugged, he's robbed, he's left for nothing. A priest comes by, doesn't help him. A Levite comes by, doesn't help him, and we say that's kind of like a pastor and like a church leader. And then a Samaritan comes by who's supposed to be kind of the enemy, and he helps him. And he not only helps him, but he like pays for him to continue to have a time of healing. And so I kind of took that and I said, hey, like one of the things we see in this, we didn't spend a lot of time on this, but one of the things we see in this is that Jesus, it was kind of the Good Samaritan for us. He came, he saw us in our brokenness when we had everything robbed from us, and we think even all the way back to creation. We were willingly robbed of what God was willing to give us. All have sinned, all have fallen short of God's glory, and so we are kind of trapped and beaten by the enemy of God, the devil, and yet Jesus came into that, and he paid the price for us, and he picked us up from our brokenness so that we could receive salvation in him. So I think this story further points to Jesus' work in us. And so if that's what Jesus does, and Jesus kind of breaks down these barriers and says, okay, for people at that time who was like, who would be like the worst, the most likely person for them to encounter that they wouldn't like.
Oh yeah.
And so when Jesus is like, hey, I want there to be a goodness there. I want there to be a fellowship there. And all of a sudden we see that as the church starts to grow, it's not just one type of people that he's calling. He's calling all people, all nations, all barriers that the world says, like, here's where your divisions are supposed to be. And Jesus calls us to break those down and to be his church. And that's the unifying factor of being his church.
And just to give enough information on a Samaritan versus a Jew, so there is like a little bit of understanding why that is, that there was this conflict, so that we can understand like how Jesus is, the reaction that the Jews would have had. Because he's speaking to a Jewish leader when he's telling this story.
An expert of the law.
An expert of the law. And so he's speaking to him, and for them, the Samaritans would have been betrayers.
Yeah.
They would have been...
they kind of turned their back.
Yeah, they turned their back on God in a sense, but not completely, and they mingled in with other nations. And that was like one of their biggest things. It's like, don't mingle with other nations.
Okay, so this is ethnocentric.
Right. And so for them, that would have been, for us, we read that and we're like, yeah, and we can easily say things like they would have had conflict, but I just like, in order to understand the fullness of why it would have inflicted such an emotion.
Yeah, it really goes, so kind of that history of it is when the people of the Northern Kingdom were kind of like wiped out and they were sent into exile, some of the people as they came back, they didn't stay true to God's plan for them. Right. And it says they intermarried with all the people around it. And it wasn't this purely ethnic thing. It was a sense of the followers of God should be following God. And so it's not they were just like marrying somebody. It was they were starting to worship these other gods. They were kind of, it wasn't just intermingling of people, because I think that as we see the gospel, we see the call for that. But God did call his people to say, okay, like maintain a holiness of worship with me. So don't worship other gods. And what he kind of led them away from was like we see consistently in the story of Israel, people would come in and become a part of Israel that came from all these different groups. We see this with in Moses and we in his marriage as he marries outside of Israel. We see this with Ruth coming in from outside of Israel. We see this with Rahab from outside of Israel. So it's not an ethnic division. It was, are people going to be the people of God, or are they going to kind of flirt with the things of the world? And so that was kind of that division is like, okay, these are people who kind of turn their back on this, and we've kind of stayed in this. But at that point, by the time we get to Jesus's time, it had kind of just turned into just this ethnic division. It was like, I don't like these
Draw
people.
a hard line, no matter what's on that side and what's on this side.
Yeah, so I think it was much less of like, oh, we remember how people stayed faithful to God's promises, and it was much more like, those are the people we're not supposed to like, or those are people who are different from us.
Right.
And so I think what Jesus calls them to, then, it jumps off the page, especially if you read it in their context of like, I mentioned in the sermon that there's a point where somebody's insulting Jesus. And they say, like, you're possessed by a demon, you're a Samaritan. And it's like those two things were like equal statements for them. And so it's not that it was a right outlook, certainly. And Jesus starts to like break that down. It's like, why is this problematic? And what should call us together is the worship of God. And I mean, there's so much more we could go into.
Yeah.
Jesus meeting the woman at the well, and saying, hey, there's this time that like you're not going to worship on this mountain, we're going to worship on another mountain, but we're coming together and we're going to worship God together.
Right.
And so I think there's this beauty that if we are the people of God and Jesus has called us to something that is a new kingdom, then it has to break down barriers of old kingdoms. And so for us, many of us aren't of Jewish descent. So we want to read this and be like, okay, well, I just need to make friends with Samaritans because that doesn't mean anything. But, and it's not just an ethnic thing. Are the people of God made up of people from all different experiences of life? I point to socioeconomic. There are people who have a lot of material ability in this world. People have very little. Ethnic distinctions, just background and cultural distinctions. Even within different groups of ethnicities, there's so many cultures within those, and so and so, or just our background, our experience in life. One of the things we talked about earlier was like, you're more of a country guy, and you kind of refer to me as a city boy, and which I would say I'm more suburban, but like each of us have such different backgrounds, experiences of life, whatever category we were to look at, and yet I don't think any of us come in and like, oh, here's those things that the world tells us how different we are. We come in as brothers in Christ, and there's these barriers that are just gone.
That's good. Okay, so define how the Bible defines unity, because what the world tells us to look at is outer appearance, I believe, and you just brought down those different divisions. But how does the Bible describe unity, and how this church? How do we try to promote unity amongst this church?
Well, the church is described as the bride of Jesus, and so like that's what popped into my mind when you said what you said, and I think of it like this: when it describes the bride, the church is the bride of Jesus. It is singular, one bride, and so we're not the brides of Jesus. We're the bride of Jesus, one singular. And though we might be different, we all make up one body. And we're told that through Paul many times. We're the body of Christ as well. Like we're the bride of Jesus, we're the body of Christ. But all these different terms they use, again, are singular. We're all called to come together to make that singular body in whatever shape, form, or fashion it is.
Well, I think that's, as you described, like the body. And Paul does mention, he said, hey, different parts of the body look different. Maybe they have different functionalities, and that's primarily what he's talking about there, is the different spiritual gifts and different ways we're going to serve and be used. But I do think as we look at it, like when it comes to spiritual gifts, it's those differences, those distinctions that make us strong. And so I think that when we consider just our backgrounds, our experiences,
our stories,
our stories, if everybody comes in with my exact same story, then the church isn't as strong. Right. Because then somebody who comes in with a different story might not feel that they can relate in the same way. And I think there's something to a lot of our human experience is you walk into a room and you kind of look for, or many people, I should say, do this. Many people walk into a room and they look for who is like me.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, and that can mean a lot of different things for people. If it's a younger person, they might be looking primarily for who is in my age range.
Right.
You know, if it's
For me, I look for height.
all right.
That's funny.
I knew that. There you go. Gotcha.
There you go.
It's
There you
easy.
go.
It's
You
easy.
get me off my. But you know, we look for like whatever people look for something that they value in that sense of commonality, so they can kind of find their place. And yet, I think when people come into our church, if they're kind of looking for that, I'll be like, okay, maybe they kind of spot what they're looking for right away. But what they find out is like, all right, like that person is also like mingling with all different types of people who don't fit that category or don't fit that experience. And like, so you have older people and younger people, people of different ethnic groups, people of different socioeconomic status or whatever it might be, and they're just there together, loving each other and caring about each other and like actually invested in each other's lives. And so when we talk about unity, I think that's what unity should look like. We shouldn't be able to walk into a church and say, this is this kind of church.
Oh wow.
We should be able to walk into a church and like, this is a Jesus church. Like, what is the thing that defines the church? Well, should be Jesus.
That's right.
Right? That ultimate Sunday school answer. Like, what's the answer, kids? Jesus.
Yes.
And like that should be what defines us. And so when I say nothing in common, it's not that, you know, if somebody comes in often on their first Sunday and like if they're wearing like camo gear or something like that, I know Dale's going to probably have a good initial connection with them of like, you know, maybe they can talk about hunting or something like that. But that doesn't mean like you or I aren't going to go over and be like, hey, good to meet you, and find those standard kind of things that we can talk about. Yeah. But ultimately, the thing that we all have in common is like we love Jesus and we love people, and we love people because we love Jesus.
Right.
And so I think when we talk about unity, it's genuine love to put aside those things that the world tells us to make a big deal of, and to exalt those things of which God tells us to make a big deal of.
Yeah.
And so Paul even, you know, gives that challenge of submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so it's giving for the good of the community,
right?
Knowing that because you got a bunch of people who are different, there's also going to be different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. And so one of the things I love is like when we sit down and talk, one of the things I love about this podcast is like we get to talk and like, you know, I didn't even consider the perspective of how much I'm just using the term Good Samaritan. And like, but like I get to hear your perspective, and sometimes just the way we're looking at it. And I want to be very clear, it's not that Scripture doesn't mean what it means,
right?
But there are so many nuances, so many layers that we get to look at and see together. That maybe there's something that you can see that like isn't something that jumps out at me right away, but like
it's the reason.
Benefits.
Yeah, that's the reason why you can read the Bible every year, and every year. Like come like, I didn't see that. It's Miss Peggy, who was, however old she was. Not going to throw her ages out there mostly because I just don't know the answer to that question. And if you don't know who that is, she was one of our older ladies a few years ago that was very faithful. And she used to say, "Was that in there?" And like she'd been reading the Bible for God knows how long.
Wow.
Literally, God knows. I don't.
To be very clear, not just a.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The humility, I think that's a key component there. What you're mentioning in that story, and I think that's a key description of what unity is. If it is what the Bible talks about, it's the mission of Jesus. It's His mission. It's a will for the Great Commission. It's to glorify God.
Yeah.
Then how do we do unity? Well, I think that's the key aspect. Is humility. Putting aside those differences so that we come together.
Right.
Well, and I think as you say that, like for us to do the Great Commission, to go into all the world, make disciples of all nations, and it starts Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, which all of a sudden jumps off the page again, into the ends of the earth. It's like, okay, then people who aren't necessarily like you, people who are different from you. You mentioned Peggy. Peggy was, age-wise, number of years on this earth-wise, very distinguishable from me, and yet, like, she was a dear friend of mine, and somebody who I learned so much from, and was blessed to know because of her faithfulness in God, and seeing what she observed and knew and could kind of bring to the table from her experience in life, and yet to know that, like, I could also be a part of, I could be her pastor and encourage her, and I would see things that she wouldn't see, and so that kind of brings us together, so that when we show up on a Sunday morning, if we're the community of Christ, if we are one body, then I believe that there should be this sense of joy about seeing each other. And that's one of the things that we really do try to intentionally make sure stays a part of our DNA. So we're kind of growing as a church, but sometimes I use the term, like, we always want to have a small mentality. We want to make sure we don't lose who we are just to have more people. And so one of the things that gives me just a particular joy is it doesn't take long after somebody comes before, like, you hear just the common phrase when people are leaving. It's like, I love you, and like, that's just like a normative thing, and it's not just a phrase. Like, I think there's a genuine love amongst the people of God, and so there's a unique affection, an appropriate affection for one another, where it's more than just like, okay, that's somebody I go to church with, but rather, like, that's part of my spiritual family. Those are people who I walk together in life with.
Yeah. All right. I got to throw a wrench here.
All right.
Yes. This is good. I like this conversation. But what makes unity so hard?
Ooh.
What makes unity so hard? Why is it so difficult?
The differences
People.
in the differences in our fun. We talked about that not too long ago, right? The ways we enjoy life, to the point of, me being country and John being city, and we even talked about this in one of the previous. Like, I love hunting, he loves plays, and like, so as much as I can, I'm going to try not to go do what he enjoys as much as I'm able, and same vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that Paul spends seemingly more time in the New Testament, second to just describing what is the gospel, the good news of Jesus. It seems that his kind of number two topic is the unity of the church. And we see it show up. I mean, you don't really get through a letter of Paul without at some point, maybe it's an affirmation of unity, maybe it's a challenge to unity. Sometimes Paul, I love Paul, but sometimes Paul's just calling it out. Like right. It'll be in the middle of a letter, and Paul will just be like, hey, like, there's some people causing division.
Yeah.
Stop it. And so I love the emphasis that we find in the New Testament on the unity of the body of Christ. I think what makes it so particularly hard is people, like, we are inherently selfish. And I want what I want, when I want it, how I want it. And if we don't intentionally, every single one of us, if we don't intentionally lay aside our pride, our preferences, our desires for the sake of the community, then we won't have unity. And so what that might look like is, just think of if we're trying to figure out somewhere to go to eat. And like, we all kind of put out, well, there's times where just, if we take three of us, what's going to make sense for all three of us? Like, what you desire, and what I desire are going to be different from each other. And so at that point, we have to make a decision. Either we are divided or we find whatever commonality we can find. And so we can be different, but we say, okay, like sometimes maybe the two of you really like the idea of a place and it's not my ideal, but it's up to me to say, okay, like because there's a sense of unity, I'm going to set aside what I particularly would enjoy in this moment for the sake of doing this thing together. And so, man, when we break down our pride and our preferences, our desire to be acknowledged and in the spotlight and me kind of focused, and make it about like the body, make it about not just about the body, make it about Jesus. And the more we make it about Jesus, then the more unity becomes, I don't want to say easy, but attainable.
Right.
That's a good word.
And so, yeah, I think that it's so easy for unity to be broken down. In fact, and I know I'm kind of going off onto a different area of this, but I think every time somebody comes in, and one, I want to be very clear, I want people to come in. When people do come in and they're looking for who are the people like me, we always have to make sure as a church that we're setting the example.
Right.
Of, we are going to be a community that's about the community, and making sure that we don't become these just different groups that all happen to meet under the same building. And so I think for us as a church, that's why one of our challenges is very often like, hey, after the service, like go meet somebody you don't know, or go connect with somebody that you haven't connected with. And so like having that constant challenge, and I love like the kind of where God has us as a church right now. I hear people say all the time, like, who is that? Who is that? Who is that? I'll sit in some of my life groups that I'm a part of, and people are like, well, who is that over there? And who is that over there? And pretty often now it's like, we'll be like, man, I haven't met all those people yet, or like, I can't keep up with all these names, and it's a good problem to have. But it's also, okay, but we want to be intentional. We don't want to just kind of get lazy or lackadaisical and be like, okay, well, people are coming in. It's not my thing to do. But this past Sunday, somebody told us they came. It was their first time here, and a group of younger people, and they had some of the older people in the church, some of our seniors, like go and connect with them, and and just say like, hey, it's good to have you, good to meet you, good to connect with you, awesome. And asking stories and asking names and caring, taking time to hear like, who are you and what's your story, not because we need to fill some quota of this number of younger people or this number of this people or this number of that. Like, we don't care about that.
Right.
And I think that's one of those most important things for us to say in here is we didn't get here as a church by seeking out diversity.
Right.
Yeah. Like we don't like try to create diversity.
Yeah.
We just love people and treat people as people. And so whatever somebody comes in as with their background, their experience, their history, those worldly boundaries, love them as people. Love them as people. Care about them as people.
That's good. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Like the purpose wasn't for diversity. That's what we want, but it wasn't like just so that we could say like we're a diverse church. Because I mean, I know that's a pretty popular thing. Like,
it sure is.
People want to say that.
It's word now.
You have two sides of it. People, a lot of churches that are like, we don't want that at all. While there's other churches that are like, that's what we're focused on. And us, we stand in the middle and we're like, we just want people to love Jesus. And we hope that comes with diversity. But as long as you love Jesus, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, we should look like the community, right?
Yeah.
And so where we're situated, there are people from all different backgrounds and experiences and ethnicities, and you fill in the like Savannah, and in particular where we're at in Savannah, just has all different types of people. Mm-hmm. And so the reality is, if here where we are at, there isn't some sense of people from different experiences, that means we're not reaching our neighbors.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a big focus here. are we reaching our neighbors? Are we being a good neighbor to whoever? And one of the things that is clear here, one of the kind of aspects of this story of this Good Samaritan is that he is walking by, that he does have this encounter.
Right.
And so he has this opportunity to be a neighbor because this is somebody that God has placed in his ability to serve.
Right.
And so it's not like, okay, well, we got to go and find people over there so that they can do it. It's just, this is where we're at. This is who we are. And so my hope and my desire and what I genuinely believe happens is that every time somebody comes in this church, they are loved. Yeah, I know a lot of churches are like, we're a loving church. And I hope that's true. I genuinely do.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously our responsibility is to this local body.
Right.
And I do believe when somebody comes in, like, they're going to be loved on. And even down to like the little kids, like one of my favorite parts of Sunday is like after service gets over and many of the kids come back over after Kids Link or after nursery, and they come in and they're like all running around, and there's no sense of like, oh, what are those kids doing? You know?
Get off my lawn.
Somebody get those kids.
Yeah. Every once in a while we do have to be like, please don't mess with that instrument up there.
Sure.
But like just knowing that like, okay, this is part of doing life together. This is part of community. And I do think that the kind of flip side of that coin is it's also okay that we don't spend every single day together, right? Like I think some people hear us say that phrase, do life together, and they're like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like every day.
Right.
And like, you know, still be a part of your community, be a part of your neighborhood.
Yeah,
like have connections outside of here, because those are people that are your neighbors in a very literal sense. And like, you need to reach them and you need to be there for them. And so, you know, I love that I have the opportunity to, like, people will invite us over for like a game night or dinner or whatever it might be, and we can go do those things, or maybe we just get together and kind of find those things that sometimes we enjoy. I know if I'm going to go see a play, I'm not inviting Dale, and that's okay, right? Like,
I did just get invited to a play the
did
other
you?
day.
Did you? Well, I mean, and I love that. Yeah, you should go.
Well, this is right.
No, but like, I think it's okay. Like, Dale doesn't usually call me up if he's going to go. I don't think he ever has, if he's going to go hunting. No. And that's okay. Right? It's not like, well, because we're part of the unity of the body, then every time Dale's going to go hunting, he needs to call up everybody in the church and like, all right, this is an open invitation to everybody.
Right.
And I'm not going to bother Dale.
And it's not. I love you all. It's not.
Not going to be quiet out there. I'm peaceful. But, you know, and I know like there are certain things that it's okay, like, that we have sometimes distinct interests or things like that. You know, if I'm maybe able to do something, maybe it's time, and it's okay. Like sometimes people get together and I'm like, man, I don't have the time that I could do that, but other people do, and that's great.
Right.
And so, yes, we should do things together outside of these walls, but I do think there can be somewhat of a misnomer of like, okay, if we're not on the phone with somebody every day, or something happens in my life and somebody doesn't immediately call me, you know, and one of my encouragements is like, one, let people know. Do people know what's happening in your life?
Right.
That's one thing.
And like directly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Not just like, hey, I put some information out there on the web and like, you should, you know, I'm not following all that stuff. But like, shoot me a text, you know, or whatever it is, you know, and that's one of my, anybody in the church who wants my phone number, they have it. Right. That's one of our marks is that people have access to their pastors, their elders, and so anybody in the church who wants our numbers, they can have them. They can text us. They can call us, because we do believe that we have responsibility to people.
And I will happily give everyone in the church his number as well.
I'm gonna tell them to like flash your number right here. So, not even just the church, but anybody who tunes in for podcasting.
Yeah, that's all right. I answer my phone.
That's right. Fortunately, we're not podcast famous.
Right.
No. But you know, there is this unique beauty to people inviting you in, but to be invited in. And so I think we have to be careful to not overstate do life together, where it's do everything together.
Right.
It's okay to like, hey, I'm worn out this week, and maybe there's something going on, and I'm not going to make it to that because I need to honor God with rest.
Right.
Great, do it, go for it. And so, it's not diversity for sake of diversity. It's not time together for sake of time together. It's community. It's healthy community, setting aside our preferences, setting aside our desires, setting aside those ways that the world says, hey, you don't go together.
Right.
And I don't know. God blessed me with the opportunity to see that from a young age. Like y'all know, I'm part Japanese, and so I had my mama, who is Japanese or was Japanese. She's since passed, but and so we go over to her house. We have like Japanese food and all that kind of stuff. And then my other side of the family is kind of white, Southern, kind of European descent, and so there's that kind of side of the family. But I didn't go like when I would go to those different parts of the family. I wasn't like, oh, here's the white family and here's the Japanese family. It was just like, this is my family. Like it and it's just as much me.
Like a fish in the water. Like, how do you describe?
Right. Yeah. It's just these were my people.
Yeah.
And so it didn't matter to me. And honestly, I don't know at what point I even realized like they're quote unquote different. I still remember, I don't remember vividly when it happened, but it reminds my ear the first time somebody referred to my mom's half Japanese, and somebody described her to somebody, and they're like, yeah, the little Asian lady. And I was like, my mom's Asian? And like, it kind of made me laugh, and I was like, I guess she is.
Yeah.
But like, it just didn't like really click with me. And, maybe I'm just not observant at all. I always said I'd be the worst for like a police sketch artist. And somebody would be like, well, what did the person look like? I'm like,
a stick figure.
That's pretty much what you're going to get from me. Which probably is a bad quality, bad trait. So hopefully I never have to do that. But yeah, like those things that I think the world wants to convince us should like draw our attention, draw our eyes. It's just like it's random little bits of information that I'm just as happy to eat food from my Japanese heritage with either of you guys as I am with somebody who shares a similar heritage. And so I think there is kind of that sense of beauty of not letting those things that the world says you're this, so be with people who are this. You're this, so be with people who are this. But we're Jesus people.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Not in a different way of saying the same thing you just said. Not allowing things that the world tell us to be barriers. We can allow them to be bridges, but not allow them to be barriers.
That's good. I like that.
Hold up, Dad. Hold on, wait. Say it again, Dale. Say that again.
Yeah, don't allow the things that the world tells us to be barriers. Instead, allow them to be bridges. The point that you just said, like, you would be willing to share your heritage with us, and that's one thing that I love is different cultures. And so, like, one of the things that we talked about once before, like one of my favorite memories is sharing culture in Belize. With the Belizean culture, which you're not going to go find a Belizean restaurant out here,
right?
It's.
I really like that.
Man, brother, if I had an organ, man, that would brother.
No, that's good. All right, so turning barriers into bridges.
That's awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
There's a sermon.
If I can say it another way, allow your story to be your ministry. Mm-hmm. That's another way of saying it too. It's a beautiful way because I think we try to do that. I guess that brings it when we think about how's that look actually in my life? Mm-hmm. To actually bring people into my life, or actually to share or to experience, to do life together with the people of the body.
Right.
How's that look in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of seeing like I like to, like my kids like to go play in the park. Okay, well maybe I need to go meet up with other people, young families in the church, and try to set up some play dates there.
Yeah.
Try to build around that schedule from time to time. Or you guys give us some more practical ways. Like, how's that look?
Yeah. So, and I think that's a really good point. Maybe one that we were kind of glossing over in the description of like, hey, we just all have, nothing in common. But like the standard things, like I love board games, and so when people are like, hey, you want to play board? Like, I'm like, I know
you're good at
I'm gonna be in on a board game. And it's okay that it's not everybody's thing,
Right.
but when you do have those commonalities, using them as an opportunity to love on people and to connect with people, sometimes doing things that aren't in your kind of realm of doing things, but yeah, like it's not uncommon for me to get together with people and play some board games or go out and do things like frisbee golf. I like frisbee golf, and so go out and do something like that. And it's also not uncommon where people are doing something I'm like, probably not my cup of tea,
No.
but that's okay. Here's some other people who that like they love that,
Yeah.
and they'll head out and do those types of things. Yeah.
The one that comes to mind is the simple fact of how much you don't like hunting, but we get to share that same culture because the reason I go hunting is partially for the peace, but also because I love food.
Mm-hmm.
I love deer. And when I go and I shoot a deer, and then I'll bring it in some chili to the chili cook-off, and we'll all sit around here and enjoy it. So in a sense, we're still all enjoying the barrier of what makes me a little bit different.
Now, and that's the thing that we do have in common.
That
we
is.
both love food.
Yeah.
And like as you said, which is kind of a whole nother topic, but like even when we've been able to do things with international missions and break down those barriers, kind of diving into not just our culture here, but cultures around the world. So often food is such a commonality and something that
Opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, sitting down and just sharing a meal together. There's something, I don't want to overstate the word, but like almost sacred about it. Of this, the intimacy of sharing a meal together, I think is particularly beautiful. And so as we even approach not just our barriers to or divisions that people might run into here, we also remember that when it comes to what God is doing around the world and for us as a church, our part in that, there are other barriers that we have to examine. Okay, how do we break down those barriers?
Right.
How do we love on people who don't live anywhere near us?
Right.
So
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Great conversation, guys. Thanks for joining. I will say this, John, was there anything that you wanted to get into, maybe in the sermon, like that you was like, man, I didn't have time to get into it, but I love to unpack it?
Oh, man. So this sermon, I spent some time talking about the expert of the law, his kind of approach to Jesus, and then this story of the Good Samaritan. And then we kind of got into Martha and Mary and what it looks like to let our service draw us close to God or our service pull us away from God. Kind of doing the things of God for God or doing the things of God to somehow prove something to him. And so, but my major focus in the sermon was how do we respond when God is teaching us? There is so much I would have loved to have more time to unpack about what it really looks like to serve with a sense of joy. And there's a beauty to serving and a sense of joy. To unpack more of what it looks like to be a good neighbor, especially when people read this story of this Good Samaritan. If we're not careful, we almost get this guilt of like, okay, every time I see somebody
Broken down in a car, I got to stop.
Right. Yeah. I got to stop and like do something at every time, or if somebody's asking for money, how am I supposed to respond to that? I would have loved to have taken a little bit more time diving into that topic. And I think kind of getting toward the end of this one, I don't want to unpack that too deeply. But I do think there is something to be said for, one, understanding our limitations, two, because we are limited. God's not limited, but we are limited. Two, understanding the distinction between need and trying to identify and understand, is there a need, or or times of potentially helping somebody stay in a bad situation. And I'm not trying to generalize of like, I don't think it's always something you can just glance and be like, oh, this is what this is.
Yeah.
But knowing what resources are available, I think is a really important thing. Knowing how to help somebody in a way that we are conscious of not enabling somebody to, or not contributing is probably a better word, not contributing to somebody staying in a bad situation, but trying to help them beyond just a way that like makes me feel good for a moment. And so figuring out what that looks like. And then finally, some people who, they're not beaten up and broken on the side of the road. So if there are times where people are in a situation that they don't want to be out of, and understanding how do we react to that? Mm-hmm. And I'm not even just talking about like in terms of economics. There are people who want nothing to do with Jesus, and we can share it, and we can tell them the truth, but at some point you can't force that on somebody. And so understanding where am I helping, where am I potentially hurting somebody, and what are the limitations to what that might look like. So I would have loved to spend a little bit more time unpacking that, but just obviously in one sermon, time doesn't allow for everything.
I think that gold nugget right there is good. I do.
Good.
Solid.
And I think we're doing a follow-up to this one, right?
Yes, we are. That's right. So come back, literally, stay tuned next week. We'll talk about all the more details of what's it like to actually serve your neighbors or maybe the nations. Stay tuned next time. Until then, Life Church, go to your mission field.